I'm Yvonne Hamoud, registered social worker and owner of New Moon Counseling, but out of the office, I'm a mom, wife, daughter, sister, and friend. Join me each week as I sit with a special guest to discuss everyday things that impact our mental health. We'll be chatting about everything from mental health and relationships to media and current events, as well as personal experiences and reflections, all in the hopes of normalizing our humanness and helping you see that you're not alone. This is Outside the Therapy Room. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Outside the Therapy Room. Today, Olivia joins us again. Hi, Olivia.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going well. Yeah, I can't believe we're at the later part of the winter, but
Yes.
the sun is with us today, so I'll take it.
I know. It's been so cold lately, but we're almost out of it. Just a few more weeks.
We're holding strong.
Yeah, I know. We're holding on strong in this cold. But thank you so much for being here today. Folks may remember that you were here in our first season. You are a menstrual and fertility coach. And I wanted to have you back for this discussion on infertility. It's something that I think in our episode, I mentioned briefly my experience in becoming pregnant. And I know this is something that a lot of women struggle with. And so, yeah, thank you so much for being here for this topic.
Yeah, it's a really deep one, and one that I think is getting a little bit more attention in recent years, or working towards normalizing this this journey that conception is not always linear for folks. So really excited to dive into it with you.
Yeah. So today we're exploring infertility, kind of like the emotional, mental, and practical challenges that it can bring. So this conversation may touch on some stress, some grief, disappointment. So if you're listening and you've experienced or this hits close to home, just please listen with care. But as we get started, can you tell us a little bit about kind of your, I guess, like your calling to kind of be a fertility coach?
Yeah, definitely. My own mental journey, which I got into in more detail the last time we chatted, really kind of ended up being a decade long. And now that I'm looking back, I'm realizing that is the start of my own preconception journey. That preconception work starts long before you even consider having children. That fertility and cycle health and lifestyle are so intertwined. So for myself, fertility is just a natural part of having conversations about menstruation, because even if you don't intend to have children, fertility is a really key part of your health and a really key signifier of what's going on in your own body. So if you're not cycling well, if you your cycle is sort of a mess, or you do go to have children and it's not as easy or as linear as you expected, that's all fertility. Fertility is just who we are as cycling beings.
Yeah. So what would you say is the connection between mindset and fertility? Because as you pointed out, sometimes we have a different view of kind of like, when we're trying to conceive, we don't recognize all of the experience within our cycle from when we started menstruating. And so I guess what's the connection that you notice?
Yeah. Well, when I was thinking about this before we got on this morning, I was thinking about how sort of ingrained it is in our cultural narrative and society and movies of feeling at odds with your cycle. Like your cycle is this thing to anticipate with dread. It's this thing we want to avoid, feeling anxious or feeling disconnected from that part of yourself. So there's already this mind-body disconnect that we've maybe experienced from age 12 or your first period. So that kind of paints one layer of what we come to fertility with, what the mindset is that we're coming into it with. Even before I was able to see when I was making changes in my lifestyle and starting to improve my cycle, and as it improved in a physical sense that, my pain started to subside and the cycling got easier, I didn't necessarily feel more connected to my cycle. I still had this deep anxiety of those symptoms that I had been living with for the better part of 10 years. This anticipation of, what if they come back? What if I got lucky this time, but next month, I could be on the floor again. So there's this deeper element of understanding your cycle and knowing what each phase will bring. And I think for me that started to ease that anxiety. And then knowing how I could tune into myself and support the changes, the hormonal changes throughout the month. It's so much deeper than I thought it would be as a menstruating person, that ingrained element of like shame and taboo. And, you gotta, when you're a kid, like hide your pad in your sleeve to go to the bathroom. And it's things that you have to face alone. Like all of that mindset trickles into preconception and conception and fertility when people are entering that phase of their cycling life. So, we've kind of been set up to have this negative relationship, and then the mind-body connection, of course, is a disconnection that follows suit.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you're so right about that. Like the kind of dread that we feel as we are approaching our periods. It's like we like have this disappointment that it's coming up soon, or this dread. And
Yes.
it's an inconvenience for us to have our period. And I can speak for myself. When me and my husband started trying to conceive, there were so many new things I learned about that I hadn't known when I was just like when I was just menstruating for, that's what's happening to my body. So I had to kind of, do what I needed to do. But I didn't really recognize exactly how we cycle through. My own cycle is different than friends, and so anytime that we would talk about like ovulation and what that looked like, it was very different. And I think you're right. Like, we talked about this in the last episode that we did together, but there's this lack of education on all of the different phases of our cycle, and that's something, as you pointed out, that's kind of like when our fertility journey starts, is unfortunately at the age of 12 when we menstruate. And so yeah, it can just be this weird mindset. I can speak for myself of when we were trying to conceive. I'm like, okay, wait a second. Now I kind of have to, look at my cycle in a different way than I did previously. And then we were trying to conceive. It took us a long time to conceive my first. Then our periods did come with a lot of grief and despair and kind of like feelings of failure, because that means that we weren't successful in conceiving. So there's like so much of this mindset that can kind of play a role in infertility or in that experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of like the biggest emotional challenges is that we've been kind of primed our whole life to avoid pregnancy. So, we start menstruating, is it early teens? And then the number one goal is to avoid pregnancy at all costs, whether that's, abstaining or going on hormonal birth control or other contraceptives. It just really reinforces that pregnancy is like this really bad thing. You must be avoided. That Mean Girls scene where they're like, if you have sex, you're gonna get pregnant and die. Like, if that is the example that you're getting as a teenager, you're already gonna have challenges sort of flipping that mindset when you are ready to move into a conception stage of life.
Mm-hmm. Well, you touched on some of the emotional challenges that we can experience. And again, speaking from myself, there was a lot of pressure during like ovulation to, try to conceive. And then it would just be like a waiting game for like that day that your period is due. And then that could be met with a lot of, I know for myself, I remember it took us a year to conceive, and closer to the end, like the 12-month mark, I did speak to my doctor and we talked about, what's kind of going on. It's taken us such a long time. And so then I was referred to a fertility specialist. I think I mentioned it in the last one, it wasn't the best experience. But thankfully, like a few days after that appointment, I found out I was pregnant. But every month, it would be an anticipation of, am I going to get my period? Was this successful? all of these emotions would kind of come, and then I would get my period and I would be met with so much grief. I would be crying on the ground. Like, remember my husband having to like pick me up, be like, it's okay. We have like, we can still like try next month or whatever. But it was just it took such an emotional toll on me. And I know, my experience is very different than a lot of other people. Other people are going into it with like years trying to conceive. So there are so many emotional challenges that we face when we're trying to conceive. But what would you say are the most common emotional challenges that people face?
Yeah, I think your own story is like pretty on the nose for lots of folks. It when we switch into actively trying to get pregnant, one, we're still dealing with this ingrained narrative of like pregnancy is something to fear, or it's bad, and also it's going to happen really easily. That's always been the narrative, that you can get pregnant every day of the month, which is not true. You could be in a hot tub with someone and end up pregnant. Like all of these sort of silly references to how easy it is to get pregnant, I think become this total shock for people when they do go to conceive and it doesn't happen quickly and it doesn't happen right away. So there's this negative view of self that sets in. The first sort of thing that comes up is, like you said, like, what's wrong with me? Why didn't it happen? What could I have done differently? And there aren't a lot of like really great resources for navigating fertility challenges, so people think they're alone. They're the only one going through it. It's not an open discussion in most people's, family or community or village circles. So they get isolated, they get stuck, and they ask their doctor, and their doctor says, oh, try for another year and then come back. And then they come back and they say, okay, well, we'll send you to a fertility specialist, and that's a 6-month wait. So they get pushed towards fertility treatments with no tools or no suggestions of what they can do in the meantime to find out why they're actually experiencing fertility challenges, or what's, no one's sitting down with them in these 10-minute doctor appointments to be like, did you know you can only get pregnant a couple days a month, and here's the window where it happens, or do you track your cycles? So that just kind of deepens this disconnect from self, I think. It's one of the biggest emotional challenges, of course. And then there's the couple element too of, feeling like you failed each other, or, one person is to blame, or it kind of cracks a couple wide open for sure.
Yeah, it does. And I think there's a lot of shame around it too, because as you pointed out, we're taught like pregnancy could happen at any minute, like be careful, contraceptives, like all of these things. And so I think it's instilled in us that, oh, it happens quickly. And so then when it doesn't, that what's wrong with me is kind of like this shame that we suddenly feel. And I think when, our community or the people around us in our social circle have a very easy time or a very different experience in becoming pregnant, then that can kind of increase our emotions around our own experience. And so it can definitely be hard. But I agree with you. Even when we would go to doctor's appointments, and this is now like 11 years ago, but I'm remembering I was like sharing concern at like the 6-month mark of us trying, and there was just like, yep, pat on the back, keep trying. It's going to happen eventually, but there wasn't any kind of resources or any education on what I could do different besides my own education with Google, right? Like trying to figure out what I could do. So yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah, we just kind of leave couples really like out to navigate it on their own. I think that's the space that I am interested in being in the fertility world. Is I don't want people to go through 3 years of feeling a lack of hope, or feeling then they get to a place where they are looking for other answers, and they're like, we've had 3 years of wasted time, or like we came almost to divorce because it was so hard on our marriage. And I just think that's really where the medical system fails us, is that there isn't enough time. There isn't enough time to do the education that we really need and get the support that we're looking for. So the earlier you start thinking about conception, my ideal time would be from the time you start menstruating. Of course, that's not really what I'm saying. I don't want 12-year-olds thinking about, having babies 20 years from now or whatever.
Right.
But just that idea of like fertility is like a lifestyle. Fertility is a part of me, and fertility is an indication that I'm a healthy cycling person. So that I think the sooner we kind of clean up that mindset and remove that negative, the shame and the taboo, and just kind of get to a place where we are proud to be cycling beings and we know what it means to move through the phases of our cycle. That's going to create this shift mentally when we are entering that preconception phase of our life to kind of, tune in and really know what it is we need to prepare our bodies for this amazing thing called pregnancy.
Yeah, yeah. How would you say infertility affects someone's sense of control and confidence in life?
So, yeah, I don't know. I think women especially like are often our default is to put forward perfection and to be top performers, and that especially got like oldest daughter syndrome in there, and these senses of like needing to have it together before I present myself to the world. Fertility challenges come in and just slash that right to the ground. Everything sort of crumbles. And I think there's like a re-meeting of who am I in the world when you're going through that. The biggest thing that I would say I see is that, there's that sense of failure, but then there's also the sense of like, why me? We have TV shows where 16-year-olds got pregnant by accident, and everyone in the world seems to be announcing their pregnancy on Instagram, and all of these like seemingly easier journeys are surrounding me. How come I'm the only one that doesn't have a baby? And I think that's where this disconnect of like pregnancy and self and the mother's journey all don't have enough space in our society and in our narrative. So it can really be kind of like a rebuilding of self.
Yeah, and I think like with the lack of control, it is that. It's like, kind of what we were talking about before, like what's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? It's a lot of that kind of self-blame when it is unfortunately, there are some places that we do have control, but we are never taught about what can we be doing different in terms of like our diet, our lifestyle, all of these things so that we can regain a little bit of control in that. But yeah, it's so tough. You're so right. Like and I think that's what makes things, it makes us feel isolated because we're kind of then going through this journey on our own. And it's hard to communicate that with friends who maybe are expecting or who have had a very different experience with their conception than we have. Then we kind of feel even more isolated in like our, like quote unquote, like incapability or whatever of not being able to conceive. So yeah.
Yeah, even the word infertility or infertile is so unnecessary to me. It really, if your doctor tells you that you're infertile or you're experiencing infertility, that to me just means that they've reached the limits of their knowledge. They can't help you in another way. They don't have anything of value to be able to support you to move out of that, out of fertility challenges. So even the language surrounding a challenging conception journey is really sort of like finite and limited.
Yeah, it is. In terms of like the clients that you have worked with, how do you typically navigate the emotional up and downs that can happen through this journey?
Yeah, it's so different for everybody. Like we said, there's big themes there of shame, inability to perform, or lack of control. But like I said, it's really challenging when you are like starting to lose hope. You're in this place where you want to be moving into parenthood, and everybody around you seems to be getting there faster or with ease. So it's pretty
Mm-hmm.
typical for both women and couples together to feel isolated, feel broken, a sense of shame of not being able to do this biological thing that they thought would just be so easy to do when they got to that stage of their life. So it can be really straining for couples. Often one partner feels like it's their fault, or they can't give the other partner what they need. Feelings of blame, feeling rejected, I'm broken, or just like not knowing how to help the situation. Really want to stress though, like this is conception and preconception work. This is a time to tune into each other. It's not a time to tune out, and
Yeah.
it will bring up those voices in your head, whether that's unresolved childhood narratives of like I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or
Mm-hmm.
I have to be able to control this situation to have the outcome that I want. Really important as couples to have those big conversations before you start trying to conceive. Have routine check-ins, rituals for connection. Even if it's that Sunday night you sit down for 20 minutes together and you just kind of touch base and hold hands and see what's coming up for you that week. I really, therapy and outside support are going to be huge, especially if you've
Mm-hmm.
been in this fertility challenge space for a number of months or moving into years. You are going to need outside support. I totally believe that. There has to be other ways to, you're going to need other tools, and you can't always get those from each other.
Yeah, and I think therapy can be helpful in this because of those narratives that exist in our minds, or of like our childhood narratives, or these like core beliefs that we have that continue to kind of come up. So they're being triggered in this kind of journey that we're experiencing. And a lot of the time, again, if we're taught to kind of keep that within, to kind of feel this sense of shame, we may not go to our partner and communicate exactly how we're feeling. But as you pointed out, like that's really important because your partner might be feeling the same way about
Totally.
themselves or about this journey, or wanting to support and feeling helpless. Because really, like a male partner or the partner who's not going through with the pregnancy is going to feel helpless in terms of how to support and how to help you get what you're wanting, or what the end goal is, which is conception. And so there's just so many things that can happen. And I know, again, speaking from my own experience and experience from friends and clients that I've worked with before, the kind of process of trying to conceive can end up becoming very disconnecting, right? Like you're
Yes.
having sex, but the goal is to get pregnant at the end. And so there isn't so much of that emotional kind of physical connection that you have with your partner, even though you're still doing the act. It's so different. And so it's about, how can you connect with each other emotionally so that that experience can be a positive one, and not just like the act of having sex for pregnancy. So it can just be a lot. But I think, as you pointed out, communication is so important, and having those external resources is going to be really helpful as well.
Yeah, and you also brought up a good point around the disconnection that happens. Like as partners, I know this with my own husband, we have different ways of working through things emotionally. And for me, that requires what I like to call counsel, outside voices. And whether that's, having tea with my sister and just kind of, putting everything on the table and hearing what she has to say, or whether that's a therapy session or some energy work. My partner deals with things more in solitude, and he'll kind of bring things up when he's ready. But I want like all of the voices to chime in, and that would
Yeah.
be not his preference. So I think those are good things to know about your partner too, going into these times that can bring up challenges that you have yet to navigate together, is understanding like, should I be setting myself up to, have some appointments ready to go, or what kind of expectations do I have of the people in my life? Is my partner comfortable with me having these conversations with my friends or other loved ones, just to kind of take the pressure off of each other too, as much as we
Yeah.
want to create connection and ritual and feeling tuned to one another. There can also be like self-work that happens before we come together too.
And I think that through those through those conversations and understanding how each couple or each partner kind of needs support, or how they process their emotions, it's also the conversation around boundaries can also be there. Like,
Totally.
how much are you comfortable with me sharing with my friends about what's happening? Or even just like, yeah, kind of like being able to set boundaries with family members to be like, stop asking us when we're having babies because we're struggling, like we're trying our hardest. And so it can kind of start those conversations too, which can be helpful for the couple.
Yeah, and those, like, that's such a, I mean, everybody between the ages of like 25 and 35, I'm sure, especially if
Oh my
you're in a
gosh.
long-term relationship, has walked into a family event and, you know, you got the aunt that's like, still no kids, eh? Meanwhile, you know, someone could have been trying for years, or they,
Yeah.
you know, have other conditions that has prevented them from having children the way they wanted to. And it's just such a sensitive subject that, yeah, even kind of like lighthearted comments, I think can do more damage than people realize. So yeah, please refrain from asking people when they're
Stop
having children.
commenting.
It's
Yeah.
not your
Plus, it's
business.
it's none of your business. Plus, it's like weird to ask. Like, just stop. I know so many people like right after they get back from their honeymoon or like a few weeks after their wedding, they're like, okay, so where's my grandbabies? Or like, well, you know, we need some kids running in here. And it's like, stop. Like,
I
stop. Just
know.
leave people alone.
People also
Yeah.
have like very funny reactions when you do announce a pregnancy, which
Yeah.
I was not expecting. We told our family over the holidays that we were expecting, and one of the funniest things was how many people said to us, "I knew it."
Yeah. Like,
You,
how did you
you
know? I didn't even know.
how did you know? We didn't disclose that we were trying to have a baby. Like,
Yeah.
that's, yeah, it's just such a funny thing. I don't know. People get very excited and it's great. And also,
Yeah.
yeah, please refrain from asking people when they're having a baby.
Yeah, that's just like more pressure that the couple doesn't need, especially if we don't know their story. And if they've been trying for years, like you mentioned, then it's not really helping. And it can bring up a lot more of the feelings that we talked about: grief, shame, all of the stuff. So, yeah, we talked a little bit about like romantic relationships and infertility and how it can impact intimacy. Is there anything else that you see in your line of work in terms of how infertility can impact those romantic relationships and intimacy?
Yeah, like you said, it sort of puts this like routine on intimacy that doesn't necessarily foster connection or make partners feel closer to each other. Can think of how many like movie examples there are where someone's like, you know, got the clock and they're like, I'm ovulating in 15 minutes, like we gotta go. And
Yeah.
that totally takes the partner connection out of it. So my recommendation is for partners to create rituals around intimacy that have nothing to do with the actual act of trying to conceive,
Hmm.
whether that's, you know, like dinners or check-ins or just like, yeah, really snuggling or just like spending time each day where you like kiss with no agenda. However, however intimacy needs to kind of be relit within your conception journey, I think that's a priority because it creates sense of
Hmm.
safety. And you know, your body's really smart and your cycle's really smart, and it's really hard to conceive from a place where your body doesn't feel safe. So
Yeah.
making sure that your partner also feels that way for the male partner. I think it's easy to get to a place where there's like this pressure to perform and it's, you know, it's all on your partner. They're the one that can really seal this deal. But it's both partners. You both need to come to
Mm.
it feeling like you're in this together, because you are in this together.
Yeah, I think a great example of that is Friends, when Monica's trying to get pregnant and kind of tricking Chandler into having sex after an argument, and then she's mad. Like it does become kind of like, okay, it's time, we have to do it today because it's my last day of ovulation, like we got to go. And it can be very robotic. It kind of like can just, yeah, take the intimacy and the connection completely out of it. So I like the idea of just prioritizing other connections apart from like the act of conceiving. So like snuggly cuddles or like the 6-second kiss ritual or whatever it is, like those things can be so helpful just to reconnect.
Yeah, I actually had someone recently say they put their childhood photo on their partner's dresser and their partner's childhood photo on their dresser, so that in times where they were feeling, you know, like frustrated, or maybe there's like a little bit of a lack of like for their partner on a challenging day, to look at that photo and be like, no, this is the child that lives within the person that I love, and I don't want to hurt that person, and I only want to bring love to the table. So, and I just thought that was really sweet.
I love that. That's really cute. And I mean, yeah, when you see a picture of your partner when they're little, it's just like, oh, like I don't want to be mad at this little thing. It's so cute.
Totally, totally. What a sweet little guy. Never heard of
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. No, I like that. So we talked a little bit about like social triggers, like baby announcements. When I was trying to conceive, literally every celebrity was announcing a pregnancy
Oh,
and it was the worst going on Instagram. But I know for a lot of clients that I've worked with, we really talk about setting boundaries in terms of social media, because it can be a lot, and it can be a lot that it kind of triggers our grief or our frustration or our shame, or, this person's pregnant and I'm not, what's wrong with me kind of mentality that we've talked about before. So how can people navigate this, or what are some things that you work with your clients in terms of navigating these social triggers?
yeah, really hard, because you get to this place where you want to avoid the outside world, because, triggers are triggering and you don't know when they're going to come, and it's yeah, it's challenging. It brings up all those narratives that you're trying to work through. My advice always is to not live in isolation, to find ways to build connection, to still keep friends in your life, to still, feel like you can attend some family gatherings, maybe not all of them, but the farther you kind of isolate yourself, the more those negative narratives creep in. So if you can maintain a sense of connection with people that do deeply care about you and do want the best for you, that's only going to help the situation. That being said, if there are things that you're not in a headspace to tackle, I had a client that was supposed to go on a girls' weekend. One of the girls coming was pregnant, and they just knew that would be the focus of a lot of the weekend, which of course is very natural. Lots of excitement within the friend group for the woman that was expecting. So she decided not to go, and she said, I didn't want to be there with a sense of dread all weekend. I would rather see people one-on-one and maintain connection that way. And I think that's valid. Another piece of that is if you do know people in your life that are going through infertility, it's always lovely to give a heads up and to know which conversation topics are maybe helpful versus harmful. Knowing that we were going to announce our pregnancy over Christmas to friends and family. There was some extended people in our circle that I thought, no, they don't need the surprise element of this. I'm just going to go ahead and connect with them in advance to say, this is what we'll be doing. Just wanted to give you a heads up and a little bit of space to process. And I don't want you to feel like, you have to leave an event because this announcement has taken place, or it brought up lots for you. So I think there's small things, and it's always communication based. Check in with the people in your life, be mindful of the conversation topics that you're bringing up, and also know what's reasonable for you. Like, have a signal with your partner if a situation socially is too much. Have a code word or a hand signal, or set your drink down somewhere and they know it's time to get their shoes on, and kind of help facilitate protecting that boundary for both of you.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's about creating these boundaries, like your client not going on that girls' trip. That was a boundary that they were able to recognize was going to be, if they went, it was going to be not enjoyable. It was going to, maybe they're going to kind of be in their head a lot, won't be able to be present and actually enjoy the time with the girls. And so having that boundary, it's important for us to recognize when we need to set that boundary and to actually follow through with it. And again, with clients on social media, constantly seeing like baby announcements and things like that, it's how can we distance ourselves from that? If every time we're seeing that, it's triggering something in us, how can we kind of set a boundary so that we're not constantly being triggered? But I think apart from like setting boundaries, we also need to sit with our emotions and know that it's okay for us to feel grief. It's okay for us to feel disappointment. And at the same time, we can have so much joy and excitement for our friend who just announced her pregnancy, or a family member who is pregnant. Like both of those things can exist at the same time, but sometimes, I think it's very, important that if you know that somebody is in your social circle, somebody that you love and care about is going through a struggle and you're pregnant, to have that one-on-one chat. because then you're like you said, right? Like element of surprise, like may not be the best. It doesn't give them like the space to really process like how they're feeling and all of their mixed emotions that come up. And so it's hard. It's definitely not easy, but just checking in on yourself, setting those boundaries, and definitely having those conversations with partner and the people around you. And I love what you said in terms of socializing, because this can be really isolating. So continuing to kind of have like at least a couple of people in your circle that you're able to still connect with and be authentically yourself to say what you want to say, knowing that you're not going to be judged.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you brought up two other things I just want to touch on. One quickly is like Facebook groups and online pages. Get off them. Just feel free to unfollow, leave the group if they're not helpful, or they are triggering for you, or they're sucking you into this place of despair. Feel free to leave. I think that's one of the healthiest things you can do. This, comparison, definitely the thief of joy, and really you have to protect your own mind space. So feel free to unfollow or leave things that aren't serving you. Not withdrawing completely from social engagements. Another part of that is that it's okay not to feel like you're thinking about what you're going through all the time. It's okay to give yourself a break, to go to yoga, to go to dinner with friends, to not have the topic of conversation be about these challenging times in your life. Like, don't feel guilty about giving yourself a mental break from what feels really heavy in your home space too.
And to add to that, I mean, we just keep adding on top of things, but to add to that, if your social circle knows that you're expecting and they're all excited for you and they're constantly asking you like, how's it going? You can set a boundary and be like, hey, like, I know you care a lot and I know you're excited and hopeful for me, but I will tell you when there's something to tell, because those check-ins can again be triggering of being like, nope, didn't work again, or, like constantly kind of being reminded. So it's okay for you to respectfully set that boundary with friends and just say, when there is an announcement, I will let you know. And that can just, again, just protect your peace and allow you to just be present, hanging out with friends instead of kind of constantly having to find ways to like dodge these questions. Cause it can be a lot.
Totally.
Yeah. Is there something you wish people outside of the fertility journey understood about supporting those who are trying to conceive?
Well, I think we've touched a lot on like, boundaries, and I think one thing people just can't anticipate is how much headspace fertility challenges take up, and the way that it weighs on a couple, and the way it's so deeply tied to sense of self and, shame and performance and all of those strong but lasting narratives that come up for people. So when we're supporting people in our lives who are trying to conceive, lead with grace. Don't assume you know what they're going through, because every couple is very, very different. Please, this is not the time to share your own stories about loss without being invited. I think often people, that's a relational point. We also had miscarriages, or which is of course devastating, and you want to share and want people to feel like they're not isolated, but that can just add more weight than is needed. And then find ways for them to feel supported and cared for and loved, whether that's just like dropping off a meal because you're thinking about them, or inviting folks into more intimate settings where it's not a big group. Find out like what it is that you need in your own conception space, and then don't be afraid to ask for that either. Don't be afraid to ask for your friends to show up for you in ways that would be helpful. I think one of the challenges with people experiencing fertility challenges is that we don't know what they need, but also we don't let people into that journey a lot. So like I said, I'm the type of person that wants to let lots of people in to know what's going on with me. My partner is not that way. Lots of other people are not that way. So if you're not comfortable sharing that you're going through fertility challenges, maybe there's a less intimate way to let people know that you're having a challenging time in your life too. But don't be afraid to have authenticity with people, and to also let them know how they can support you and how that would be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the supporting people, also, check, like gently checking in, but also holding space, right? Sometimes we jump in with advice. Well, have you tried this? Have you tried this position? Have you tried eating this? Or there's like an old folks tale of like, try this, try eating a whole bunch of this. That's supposed to make you super fertile. Like,
Right.
let's just sit and listen for a little bit and hold space for that person experiencing what they're experiencing. And if they ask for advice or suggestions or tools or whatever, then we can provide that for them. But yeah, it can be really overwhelming to just jump in with, hey, have you tried all these 20 different things?
Right. Right. Yeah, and as
So
much as it comes from a really well-intended place, sometimes the best thing to do is just show up and not offer solutions.
exactly. Yeah. I know when I was going again through this journey, a lot of people would be like, try not to stress. If you stress, that's going to impact your body and that's not going to help you. And so it's a very stressful situation. So naturally, you're going to feel stress, and that's completely normal. But are there any mindset tools or exercises that you recommend just to help your clients manage stress and disappointment?
Yeah, I would say it depends on like where you hold your stress. Maybe for me, like my stress is always in my gut. Feel like that might be similar for other people. Other people, it's in their shoulders.
Yeah,
Um,
mine's my shoulders and neck. Yeah.
Totally. Like that's such a place of tension where we hold it, we hold our stress. Yeah, I find for me, it's like I clench my stomach, really noticing like where you hold your stress and then also how your stress is ruling certain situations. Is it,
Mm.
can you make small changes like going to bed earlier or getting some sun in the morning or take can you move all of your meetings to like 2 days of the week so you have downtime where you're actually able to focus on your work, free up headspace for yourself, whether that's like rituals after work or certain foods that bring you a lot of joy, like maybe you really look forward to your lunch every day. Look for moments of how you can build in stress relief during your day. So it's not just something you're trying to accomplish, on Saturday when you got the day off. How can you be kind of minimizing your stress gradually throughout the week? And yeah, maybe that's just like cooking dinner with your partner, or maybe you love to do a YouTube workout and that's kind of like your meditative time. But the more that you can focus on nervous system regulation as a practice within your already existing routine rather than something that you have to go and do, I think is always going to serve you better. Even just
Hmm.
like noticing, oh my gosh, I've scrunched my shoulders up and I've been sitting here for an hour. Let me
Yeah.
just take a breath and let my shoulders relax a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be these big monumental shifts. You don't have to commit to these like 30-day routines to better health. I think the most balanced and the most maintainable, the
Yeah.
easiest to maintain is when we make small changes that we're to just become a part of who we are after.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, the nervous system regulation, and that can sometimes just be starting small.
Yeah.
They're like if we're constantly feeling a sense of urgency, if we're rushing through everything, it's just slowing down, right? Like if we're like, brushing our teeth super quickly, like let's just like slow down, and that can help regulate our nervous system, just kind of taking things a little easier. So I like that we're not adding new things, we're not adding more stuff, but we're just being more intentional in the things that we do have, and the things that we are practicing in that. Yeah.
Yeah, slowing down. I saw a great TikTok the other day where this woman was like really quickly unloading the dishwasher and like really quickly putting food away and like tidying her living room. And she was like, and what if I did all of this without a sense of urgency?
Yeah.
And I was like, I've been thinking about that all week. How we just really kind of get into our own our nervous system gets hijacked because we're in these
Yeah.
high states of stress, and then it trickles into every single small task that exists in our lives.
Yeah. And like, well, why? Where's the rush? Why are we rushing through like our nervous system's like, we need to hurry, we need to hurry. But it's like, but why? We have nowhere to go. We can slowly like put the dishes away, we can slowly clean up the counter, right? Like, yeah, it's just the act of slowing down can actually be really impactful. So, yeah.
Brushing your teeth is a good one. I think I might be guilty of the frantic brush.
Like so fast. Yeah. In your line of work, what kind of like fertility coaching techniques do you provide just to support your clients' mental health?
Oh, that's a great question. My work, I really have the privilege of being individualized. These are not your 10-minute appointments with healthcare providers. These are one-on-one, built for you. We're creating, a roadmap to your own goals and then finding the tools to kind of move you there.
Mm-hmm.
So individualized, but it also all starts with education. You and I talked about how there's such a gap in education.
Yeah.
If someone is experiencing fertility challenges, we're right back to basics. Are they aware of the 4 phases of their cycle? Are they aware which days they're ovulating on? Cycle tracking, those small things that could be the missing piece. Let's strip it back to basics. And then for the mental health piece of this, partner connection, small rituals, and then focusing on what you can control. Again, one of the biggest, hardest things I deal with my own, control tendencies. I think that's something that lots of people have to work through, especially when you come up in an academic environment and then you're in the corporate environments. Like it's just such a part of the routine. So figuring out what you can control and focusing on that. I always think there's such a sense of like doom and gloom in the world, like world news and all of these kind of bigger, larger things that we personally can't control sitting, at our desk on a regular day. So what can I control within my own journey that's going to move me towards my goals? Mm-hmm. And that can be really small things. For myself, when dealing with really painful periods and trying to move out of that, what I could control was going for a walk every day. I could control the foods that I was nourishing myself with. And then I could also control how much rest I had. So for me, like going to bed at a decent time became really, really critical. It was also like a mental health protection mechanism where when you're going through maybe withdrawal or from foods or symptoms, kind of running your life, that anxiety just became easier to calm when I went to bed earlier for me. There was like less time in the day for the anxiety to run my mind. So creating kind of like small things as we talked about, but also knowing that there are things that are going to be out of your control and there are lots within your control. So it's about reframing what the focus can be, especially when you're, if you are someone that's pursuing fertility treatments and you're waiting for doctors' recommendations. Okay, what can we do in the next 6 months that would hopefully get you closer to where you want to be? What changes can we make together with you and your partner? And then noticing what your symptoms are telling you too. So if there's, an absence of ovulation, that's a very different track route than my cycles are super, super long and my fertility window is kind of so long that I'm not actually sure if I can sustain a pregnancy or my progesterone is too low or whatever the reason may be. That gives some time to make small changes and see how your cycle responds too.
Yeah, I like the focus of what's within your control because as we just said, we can control our pace. We can control like what we decide to put into our body, how we decide to move our body. Like all of those things are so important. But I think one thing we talked about in our previous episode too is we can control how we advocate for ourselves. And so even in those doctor's appointments when they're like, okay, cool, in 6 weeks we'll take a look again. You can communicate and be like, what suggestions do you have? Like, what can I be doing in the meantime? And kind of advocate for your care in that way. It's annoying that we have to do it, but that is something that is within your control and that you can ask for.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you find like there isn't like tangible things that you come away from an appointment with, like, ask for a referral for a massage, ask for, to see other practitioners too. I always stress to people that you can't you can't face challenges in isolation. We all need a village, and crafting your village takes time. And it's also an important part of your own health journey. So for me, my wellness team is made up of lots of different practitioners that I see as needed. But my wellness team is also the people in my life. It's, it's getting out for a walk with my sister or going to visit family, finding what type of nourishment you need, both, food nourishment and also soul nourishment, and really prioritizing bringing that into your life in a regular way.
Yeah. Yeah, we touched a little bit on this, but how do you help clients stay connected to their body? Because there can be a disappointment that we can have with our body for not doing what it's quote unquote supposed to do. And so, yeah, how do you kind of help clients connect to their body and their intuition without falling into this pressure of perfectionism?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, $1 million question. I don't know if I have like one solid answer for that. I can speak for myself. Like I said, when I started making dietary and lifestyle changes about 10 years ago, that as those symptoms subsided, I still had that anxiety that was hanging around and this disconnect from my body, this like deep sense of or lack of self-love that was going on. Of course, that comes from, like childhood bullying and peer pressure and all of those things. So I really had to fall in love with myself again. And that was, it's no small task to do that, but I really think that's what started to ease that anxiety, was like viewing myself in this way where I know I'm strong. I know I have control over this. My symptoms are changing. I don't have to stay this way. I think that mindset piece of like, I can love myself, I don't have to stay in this place of suffering, was a multi-year long journey. And then eventually the introduction of like energy work and therapy and moving through these kind of past traumas and narratives that hang out. But it was also through artwork for me. So I have an art background, and I did some performance pieces. I realized I had a lot of shame around my body hair, of having dark hair, of, being Portuguese and having like a mustache since I was 12. And I had this like kind of ritual of like waxing my lip every week since I was a child, basically, for fear of being bullied. And the bullying came anyway, whether you're doing it or not. People always find something to pick on you about. And then it wasn't until university, when I was doing these performances, these artworks, that I grew out all of my body hair. And I shaved it in a gallery performance out of a bucket. I shaved my legs and my armpits. And it was really like a turning point for me. The reinforcement of my peers being like, hey, that was really cool of you. I related to that. I saw myself in that story. That totally broke down the walls of shame for me. And I thought, yeah, this is my body. This is who I am. People don't feel differently depending on how I look. Those are the real people in my life. And it was, totally healing for me. And, not everyone's going to have like a breakthrough moment like that where they like go home and they're like, wow, I'm alive and people still love me even if I have hairy legs and hairy armpits. But for me, that was pretty transformational, and it kind of cracked open this deeper work of healing of, why am I viewing myself in such a negative way? And then why do I view my cycle with such shame? So they were really connected for me.
Yeah, I love that. And that just goes to show art can be such an expressive, tool. Because, that sounds like it was really powerful for you and for a lot of people who were able to witness that as well. But it's about trying to reconnect with our body. And again, a lot of the things that we've talked about today is that, like slowing down, reconnect with your body, kind of notice what it needs, even in communication with your partner around trying to conceive, like tune back into your body, try to find those moments of connection that are less about the, conception and more about connection. And just, you touched on this just now too, like our relationship with our bodies. And I'm speaking like for myself and for a lot of women that I've worked with, it can be a very complicated kind of relationship that we have. And it starts, sadly, at a really young age. And, we start developing breasts, and that brings a whole bunch of things in it. And if we don't develop breasts until later, that has its own kind of feelings about it. Like, there's just
no winning.
There's no winning. There really is no winning. And that kind of continues with us, I think, into adulthood, where now we're looking at our body, as this source that can give us this family, or that can give us like this next chapter in our lives. And when we're talking about infertility, or just being a little bit more challenging to conceive, we can have a lot of, like, an addition of like negative views of our body, and just being let down by our bodies. And even for, women who, like, even just taking away conception from it, it's like, if they used to run marathons and now they had an injury, and now they're upset with their body for not being able to perform in the way that they know it could have in the past, like, those are moments of grief. We're grieving the body that we used to have. And so it's a really complicated relationship that we have with our body. But I think we also need to look at things a little bit more neutrally, because we can't go to body positivity all the time straight away. Sometimes we just need to be thank our body for what it is giving us. So I'm thankful that, my body was able to get me, to work, or like, I'm thankful for these arms because they get to hug the people that I love, or, my legs were strong enough to help me carry, groceries in from the cart, like whatever it could be, but just kind of trying to reconnect with your body in a neutral way, and to pay attention to our body, because so much exists in our body, and it's connected to our mind and our emotions, but we don't always pay attention to it. And so, like you said, your gut is your main source of like anxiety or stress. It's like, it's all kind of collected there. You learned that through connecting to your body. Otherwise, we'd be like, oh, my stomach's upset. And then it's just like, my stomach's hurting, but I don't have any, like, that's kind of the end. So really trying to listen to your body, check in with your body, kind of slow down, and make space for those emotions that come in, all the complex emotions. They're going to come in, and just, practicing that self-compassion.
Totally. I love what you said about like grieving the old self. That like that's going to happen multiple times in your life, whether you are an athlete with an injury, or when, you do end up pregnant. Like, there's a lot of changes that happen within a short amount of time, and then there's a lot of changes that happen afterwards too. So it's hard if you don't have this basis for self-love, or even just like positive reinforcement for yourself of like, my body's amazing, I cycle with ease, I ovulate every month, or I'm able to sustain a pregnancy, or I'm growing a whole freaking human. All of those, whatever stage you're in, if you can lean into the ways that your body is doing amazing things without being prompted, it just does that for you. That's such a good headspace to be in. I love what you said. Yeah, my body's so strong. I carry my groceries in from the car. My body got me where I needed to go today. All of that is like that positive reinforcement for yourself too. And it is great to hear from other people. If you need your partner to pump you up sometimes and tell you how hot you are, great. That's so needed too. But the more that you can kind of keep that positive headspace for yourself, it's only going to serve you through the different cycles of your life.
If we had a listener that is struggling with infertility, what's one thing that you would want them to know?
First thing is that there's no one way to navigate fertility. There's going to be a lot of feelings that come up, and they all have a place, and they are all valid. And what's important for you to know is that you don't have to stay in those negative spaces, that negative self-talk, the anxiety that starts to run the show. This is temporary, and allow it to be temporary. Allow yourself to feel it fully, whether that's grieving what you anticipated your body would do for you, or grieving the journey to conception that you thought you would have. All of that is valid. For yourself, just really give yourself grace, decide what your boundaries are, ask your partner to support you in the ways that you need, find how you can support your partner too, and like we said, tune into each other and really know that you're not experiencing it in isolation, even though it feels very isolating in this moment.
Mm-hmm. As you were speaking, I kind of like recalled maybe we should make this comment, but we really focused our episode today on women. But I know like men who are struggling with infertility, there could be so many emotions that come up from that, like inadequacy or not being able to perform or feelings of failure, like all of this. And I think a lot of the messaging that we gave today can also be applied to men who are feeling this way. And so even though our main focus, we were kind of talking about women, but anybody who's kind of going through this like infertility or like this disconnect with their body or disappointment for their conception journey or whatever it could be, I think a lot of the things that we mentioned can also be applied to them.
Yeah, and for both parties, don't shy away from getting the support that you need.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything that we didn't cover that feels important for you to share?
For myself, I know we talked a little bit about like fertility treatments and doctor weights and those sorts of things, but my role as a fertility coach is really to help couples address lifestyle factors and optimize nourishment and make those routine changes that are going to move them towards their conception goal. So I also work one-on-one with clients that are experiencing infertility. My role as a coach is not medical advice. It's to help you decode your symptoms and find where you can make small changes to begin to move the needle in your own life. Mental health and mindset are two huge pieces of that puzzle, and I always recommend having a team of people, therapists, chiropractors, acupuncturists, whoever kind of fits into what your needs are. It's really important that you build a team that you can rely on. So I would just say that working with a fertility coach, your experience is going to be much more personalized and really tailored to your goals. So that could be everything from, changing exercise routines, finding, like we said, nervous system regulation practices in your day-to-day, changing what you're eating, or maybe you've had some labs come back and you don't know how to make sense of them. Let's look at where there are some deficiencies or points in your life that could use a little bit of extra love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you for for sharing that, because I think, like fertility coaching and just being resourceful and trying to, as you said, kind of create this village around you. And that can be with a variety of professionals, like you said, yourself as a fertility coach, mental health, therapy, chiropractor, acupuncturist, physio, like whatever it could be. And also having your support outside of those professions. So friends, family, all of those people who can also support. But yeah, it's amazing that we, are so privileged to be able to have so many professionals now in the field. And again, in this field in particularly around our fertility. So yeah, it's really cool to see.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's such a benefit to healing in community is how I would put it. Last year I ran a cycle reset course that was a group course, cycle education, basic living within your cycle information, and then also the type of nourishment that can really help you move out of having painful or irregular periods. And of the 8 women in that group, by the end of the year, 3 of them were pregnant. So that was really exciting for me to see that those women took the information in, made changes in their own life. They didn't need, sustained care from me. We met the 4 times, some of them for an additional 5th, and then that was it. They were able to implement into their own life, and that's always my goal, is that, we don't need to see each other 100 times. I just want you to have the information that you need to go off and make changes on your own.
Yeah. Well, where can people find you if they are kind of in this journey? How can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at The Menstrual Coach, and then my website is themenstrualcoach.com.
Okay, awesome. We'll have all of that in the show notes. So if you have any other groups or anything like that, people can find that on your social media.
That's right. Yeah, I'll be running that course again in the spring, and I've got a webinar in the works, preconception planning for couples. So yeah, stay tuned for more this spring.
That's so great. Make sure you follow Olivia on Instagram then. And I know we talked a lot about infertility kind of feeling lonely and overwhelming, but hopefully conversations like this kind of reminds us that support and tools can make a meaningful difference, and you can kind of create this community around you for support. So, yeah, thank you so much Olivia for sharing all of that.
Oh, Yvonne, thanks for inviting me into this conversation. It's a really important one.
It is. Thank you so much. Like I said, we'll have all of Olivia's information in the show notes. And make sure to follow us also on social media at Outside the Therapy Room Pod on Instagram and TikTok. Thanks again, Olivia, and we will see you all next time. Bye. Thank you for listening to Outside the Therapy Room. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you reside in Ontario and are interested in working with one of our therapists, please visit our website in the show notes. If you reside outside of Ontario, a quick Google search or search through Psychology Today will help you find a therapist near you.